Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And we have covered at some length the role that George Soros plays in South Africa through his Open Society Foundation. And he has very strong ties with the senior ANC politicians through his ex-Open Foundation staff, now working as advisors for people like Ramaphosa. And you can understand what's going on there. And you can understand why certain things like expropriation of land without compensation are taking place. Because clearly, with that and the National Health Insurance Scheme and other crazy schemes, there is someone behind that. And that's called George Soros. And it's not just in South Africa that Soros has got his greasy, grubby little fingers. Take the European Union. Very interesting article has just come out about the judicial system in Europe. Let me just give you a bit of meat to the bone. A study by the European Centre for Law and Justice in Strasbourg has revealed several conflicts of interest between judges at the European Court of Human Rights. Okay, the European Court of Human Rights, or ECHR. You got that? And NGOs, or non-government organizations, funded by George Soros. The European Centre for Law and Justice is an NGO which often appears at the court to campaign on social, family, and religious-related issues. I am proud to be listed as a research fellow at the ECLJ. Now remember, that's the European Centre for Law and Justice. But in reality, I have written only one article for the Centre's website and I received no salary from it. I had no role in writing the report. The study has found that out of the 100 judges who have served on the bench of the European Court of Human Rights in the period 2009 to 2019, nearly a quarter, or 22 out of 100, have strong links to George Soros's Open Society Foundation or to non-government organizations like Amnesty International and others which are funded by George Soros. Human Rights Watch, for instance, has received $100 million from the Open Society Foundation since 2010. Some of the NGOs receive so much of their budget from Soros that they are in effect wholly owned subsidiaries of his foundation. The link between judges and the NGOs are substantial. They include working for years as members of the board of directors of executive council of these NGOs, having teaching posts at institutes funded by them, being a salaried director of programs for the Open Society Foundation or associated NGOs, and undertaking other forms of paid work for them. The full list of these links can be found on pages 7 and 8 of the report, and I'll put a link to the report below this video. A good example is that of Bulgarian Jonko Groves, who as the leader of the Open Society Justice Initiative defended the Pussy Riot against Russia in 2018, before being elected as a judge of the court shortly thereafter. The study does not include less formal forms of collaboration with NGOs, such as occasional work for them. This means that the links are even greater than those specifically addressed in the study. The report also covers other human rights officers, such as the Commissioner for Human Rights at the Council of Europe from 2012 to 2018, Nils Maisniks, who does not sit as a judge, but who was for years a salaried activist of the Open Society Foundation in Latvia, and who has used his official position to campaign against the so-called anti-Soros legislation in Hungary. These NGOs are extremely active at the ECHR. The Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights in Poland filed 16 applications and defended 32 cases in 2017 alone. Very often the role played by the NGOs does not appear in the court records, but has to be discovered from the NGO's own reports instead. For instance, A case can be defended by lawyers from one NGO with pleas heard from the other NGOs as third parties, even though the other organizations are in fact financed by the same source as the applicant, usually Soros. There would not be anything wrong with judges having exercised a salaried activity for an NGO prior to becoming a judge if these same organizations were not themselves active as parties who bring cases to the ECHR, either as applicants themselves, as lawyers for applicants, or as third parties giving supposedly expert evidence, but in reality lobbying for a cause, and if those judges did not even hear those cases. What you're actually seeing here is that this whole situation with illegal immigrants pouring into Europe is basically part of Soros's plan to destabilize the whole region. It's quite incredible. Anyway, let's continue. Indeed, the report's worst finding is that in 88 cases, judges sat on the bench ruling on cases brought to the court by NGOs they had previously worked for, without declaring a conflict of interest and without withdrawing from hearing the cases. In one case, ruled on in 2018, 10 out of the 14 NGOs that had brought the case were funded by the Open Society Foundation, while 6 out of the 17 judges who heard the case themselves had links to the same Soros-funded group. Talk about a conflict of interest. Crazy. The judge's refusal to withdraw is a disgraceful professional failing, which shows that Europe's supreme human rights body is not, in fact, independent, but is instead part of a veritable human rights industry, a pyramid of money and a tight network of professional relationships, at the top of which sits George Soros with his billions. NGOs are supposed to represent civil society independent of states. In reality, a very large number of them are the creation of actors with no democracy, legitimacy, like the Open Society Foundation. The fact that this corrupt system has been able to flourish has several causes. The first is that Soros and the NGOs he finances dominate the human rights industry across the Balkans and the Baltic states. His millions flood these small, poor countries. He has spent $131 million in Albania since 1992, for instance, and they in turn appoint judges to the ECHR, which rules on human rights issues for the 47 member states of the Council of Europe. Indeed, the report finds that the total spending of the Open Society Foundation in Europe of $90 million a year actually exceeded the annual budget of the European Court of Human Rights, which is just $70 million a year. Second, new procedures introduced in 2012 specifically provide for NGOs to take part in the selection procedure for judges at the ECHR. These NGOs can propose candidates and they can lobby for their selection. They have done this on many occasions, as the report shows. In the case of Albania in 2018, for instance, 2 out of the 3 candidates were executives of the Open Society Foundation. One of them was elected. Finally, there is no requirement that people appointed to be judges at the ECHR have any judicial experience at all. Some 51 out of the 100 judges who have sat on the ECHR bench since 2009 had never been judges or magistrates before. Instead, they were very often human rights activists working for Soros or one of his front organization. This is a structural weakness which also attracts international war crimes tribunals. As I showed in my book, Travesty, it means that people can wield judicial power who are not, in fact, trained judges or magistrates, or even necessarily lawyers, but instead political activists. In some very egregious cases, people have become judges on the benches of these tribunals without even having a law degree. Nice job if you can get it. The result is that judges who sit on these bodies do not, in fact, behave as judges should. The role of the judge is to say what the law is, not to say what he or she thinks the law should be. Now, isn't it starting to sound like South African judicial system? And we're talking about the European Union. This is what's going on there. thanks to George Soros. Unfortunately, this is exactly what judges at the ECHR and at the new international tribunals do. In 1978, the ECHR proclaimed that the convention was a living instrument which must be interpreted in the light of present-day conditions, and that therefore its judges had the right to read new things into the convention instead of agreeing to be bound by it. Such judicial activism is a travesty of the rule of law. It is a travesty because the areas in which the ECHR judges exercise their judicial activism are precisely the most politically sensitive issues, which should properly be decided by politicians in elected parliaments or by referenda, and not by an elite caste of unaccountable activists. Those areas include freedom of expression, asylum, LGBT rights, conditions of detention, minority rights, and so on. Using their freedom to make up the law, ECHR judges have over decades applied a new vision of man, which is the opposite of the original intention of the convention, which was to protect human beings and their families from abusive state power. Now the ECHR spends most of its time demanding more state power for this or that fashionable cause. Now, isn't it interesting that in South Africa, thanks to the Open Society Foundation, we now have LGBTQ being pushed in schools to kids as young as 8 years old. This is what Soros is doing in South Africa. He is a complete disgrace to humanity. Anyway, let's get back to this. George Soros has long been attacked for the excessive political power his gigantic fortune has bought, especially in post-communist Eastern Europe. This report by the European Centre for Law and Justice is, however, one of the first occasions in which the corrupting effect of that power has been scrupulously identified and documented with respect to the supreme body charged with protecting human rights in Europe. To date, the ECHR has not denied any of the facts outlined in the report, and to the extent that these facts cannot be denied because they come from the ECHR itself, its credibility as an independent judicial body now lies in ruins. So, the devil incarnate is called George Soros, and the Open Societies Foundation should be evicted from South Africa. All its arms, all its NGOs, they are corrupting the political system in South Africa. It's what they do. All right, guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video. Please share this video. And above all, please stay safe.